In this video, we're going to continue converting the Notes application to the new project structure. Now, before we actually move any files over or copy any code, I want to talk about why converting this project is going to be a little harder than it was to convert the Hangman application. To kick things off, let's go ahead and start with Notes functions and Notes app.js. One of the very first things that Notes app does is it creates the Notes array. So we get this value by calling getSavedNotes, and getSavedNotes just reads data out of local storage. If there is no data in local storage, we just start off with an empty array, and this function has been working really well so far. It gives us access to the notes, which we can then use in this file. For example, we render the notes right here, and then down below, we add a new note. Now, all of this currently works, and it's going to continue to work. We're going to be able to access notes from inside of this file like we currently do. But there's a problem with our current structure that's not going to work when we introduce the module system. That is the fact that this variable is being used by other files as well. So other files like Notes functions are relying on this global variable to exist. Over here, for example, inside of the remove note function, we access notes using find index. Then down below, we access notes using the splice method. This is not going to work once we introduce JavaScript modules. As we learned in one of the very first lectures for this section, when we use JavaScript modules, each module, so each file, has its own scope, meaning that we can't share variables between files like we're currently relying on. Instead, we need to use export and import to transfer data between those files. So we're going to do a bit of restructuring to create a better application. To kick things off, let's go ahead and create a brand new file in the source directory. This file is going to be called notes.js, and this is the file that's going to be in charge of managing those notes. So for example, in here, we're going to have a notes array, just like we did before. Then we're going to export a series of functions allowing anyone to manipulate that array, whether they want to add a new item, figure out what items are in the array, or remove a note by its ID. So in the end of the day, functionality is going to be the same. It's just about restructuring things to better take advantage of the modules system. So let's go ahead and kick things off by creating that array. Let notes equal an empty array. Now down below, we're going to be able to set up all of the functions necessary to actually work with the notes array. That doesn't mean we're going to be copying everything from notes functions, just some of the stuff inside of here. For example, we are going to bring over getSavedNotes, save notes, and remove note. We're not going to bring over generate note DOM. So we only want to bring over things that relate to managing this array of notes. Other things like generate note DOM will live in a different file we'll create a bit later in the course. Let's go ahead and start with just one function. I'm going to copy this first one, getSavedNotes, from notes functions over to notes.js. The getSavedNotes function works in its current state. No need to change any of the function code. Down below, we can go ahead and actually call it. Notes now equals whatever comes back from calling getSavedNotes. So we are populating the notes array, which is a great first step. The name getSavedNotes is a bit confusing now. I'm going to go ahead and switch this up to something like load notes. So I'll switch the function name over to load notes. Then down below, I will call load notes instead of calling the old function getSavedNotes. And there we go. The notes array is now going to get populated when this file actually runs. Now this is great and all, notes does get populated correctly, but it doesn't give other files in the program access to any meaningful data. So let's go ahead and fix that by creating another function, and this one is going to be a new one, something that doesn't exist inside of the old notes functions file. Let's go ahead and make a new const. I'm going to call this one getNotes, and we're going to set this equal to about the world's simplest function, an arrow function that takes no arguments, and all we're going to do is return notes. So the goal of this function is to just expose the data stored in the notes array. This is a function that we are going to export from the file. So let's go ahead and get that done. Right here, at the very bottom, export, inside of curly braces, the getNotes function. There is no need to export load notes. We're not going to use it in any other files, though you're more than welcome to do so if you happen to have a need for it. Up above, let's go ahead and leave a quick comment for this new function. Expose notes from module. Perfect. So now we have something we can actually work with. And what I want to do is move over to index.js, import this file, and call the new function we just set up. So right here, we are going to use the import statement. I'm going to grab our named export get notes. Then after the curly brace closing, from inside of quotes // which is the source directory, the file we're looking for is notes.js. From here, we can now call get notes and do something with the output. I'm just going to use console.log to print it. I'll call get notes, which takes no arguments. Now let's go ahead and save index.js and see what happens over inside of the browser. What do we get? We get an empty array showing up for index.js line 3. That's the line right here, and that's a good start. The array is indeed showing up, which is great, even though it's empty, and it's just empty because we don't have any data stored yet. We'll fix that problem when we actually set up data storage. So at this point, we have a very basic version of our notes module, and I want to continue adding functionality to it. Next up, let's give ourselves a way to create a note. So once again, we're going to create a new function in this file and export it so it can be used by the rest of the application. In the past, we didn't even have a function for creating a note. We just had a set of code inside of our event handler. So we're going to go ahead and clean that up by breaking it into a function that we can use and reuse anywhere we need. Over inside of notes.js, let's kick this process off by creating a new function down below, const create note. Now create note isn't going to need any arguments, and inside of there, we're going to go ahead and do a few things. First up, we're going to need to generate a new ID using UUID, and we're also going to have to generate a timestamp using Moment. Neither of those are tools we currently have installed. So before we can continue, we actually need to install a couple of third-party modules. I'm going to switch over to the terminal, shut things down with Control-C, and we're going to use a single npm install command. npm install. First up, we could do Moment. The order doesn't matter. Moment at 2.22.1, then a space, the second module, UUID, at 3.2.1. Now these are all modules we've worked with before, so we don't have to learn anything new. We're just switching from using script tags in the old project to actual modules in the new one. Let's go ahead and run that installation command, and once it's done, I'm just going to restart the dev server so we still have that running in the background. Then we'll be able to take advantage of both of those modules in the new create note function. While that's running, we can take a quick look at what we're going to need to do. Inside of Notes app, we have some code that creates the ID, creates the timestamp, then pushes on to the notes array. We're actually going to end up doing the exact same thing, so we can take these three statements right here, copy them, and bring them over to that new function. So now create note ends up doing something very similar to what the previous code was doing. The only problem is that we're currently relying on things like UUID v4 and Moment, which don't exist. In the background, our npm install command did seem to work successfully. Let's go ahead and restart the dev server. And once the dev server is up and running again, we're going to go ahead and add those imports at the very top of this file so we can use those two dependencies. Right here, import UUID v4 from. We have used this one before. It was UUID/v4, which we found from the documentation. Down below for Moment, import Moment from Moment. That's a super easy one. And there we go. We now have a create note function in place. Create note does exactly what the old code did, but it's now broken out into a function we can use and reuse as soon as we actually export it. Let's add a new item onto our export list after get notes, comma, space, create note. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and actually test things out. Over in index.js, I am going to add that as another import. So we want to grab create note so we can use it. Then down below, I'm going to take our current console.log call and I'm going to duplicate it. So I want 2 copies of it. And right in between, we're going to call the new create note function. So we should see our first log print an empty array, and our second one should have a note inside of it. I'm going to save the file, the browser refreshes in the background, and that's exactly what we're getting. The first array has no items, the second one has 1, it's an object, and if we expand that, we can see it is a complete note. So we have our empty body and title. We also have our created at and updated at timestamp. And finally, we have our randomly generated ID. So now we have a way to read our notes and we have a way to create a new note, all of that code living nicely in notes.js. Let's go ahead and create another function as well. This one is going to be similar to something that we already have, and it is going to be save notes. Save notes is going to save the data to local storage. Now we already have that function over in notes functions. Sitting right here, we have save notes. We can actually take this function and copy and paste it, since the new function is basically going to be the exact same thing. I'm going to take it over to the new file. I'll put it right here after load notes, and we're just going to make a single small change. Instead of taking in notes as an argument, we're just going to access notes from the parent scope. So we have our notes global for this file. Down below, we use local storage.setItem to set the notes property equal to the stringified version of the notes array. So now we have save notes, and it's actually working as expected. We can go ahead and start calling this to save our data throughout the process. One place I'm going to call it is right at the end of create note. So I create a new note, I change the notes array, but to make sure that data actually gets saved, we'll just add a call to save notes on to the end. Now, if we go ahead and test things out, we're going to see the first time around, we still have an empty array, and then we have an array with one object. But if I refresh the page, we should see we start with an array with a single item, and we end with an array of 2 objects. That's because the first time this page runs, we add our first item. When I refreshed it, this code ran again, and we were able to add and save our second item because create note calls save notes, which actually saves things to local storage. So that's where I want to stop for this one. We're not done the conversion process yet, but when we need to do a lot of refactoring like this, I can find it really taxing mentally. So feel free to go at a pace that's comfortable for you. I am going to take a quick moment to recap what we've done so far, and then I'll set us up for the next video. In this video, we focused on creating our notes module. The notes module is going to contain everything needed to work with and manipulate the notes array. Other files are going to be able to actually manipulate the notes array by calling one of the functions this file exposes. In this case, we're exposing 2 functions, getNotes, allowing another file to get the current notes, and createNote, allowing another file to actually create a note. We saw all of this work over inside of index.js. Here, we imported those 2 functions, and we used them to manipulate the data behind the scenes. Index.js doesn't need to know the implementation details of either of these functions. Index.js shouldn't even care that local storage is being used. All it knows is that it's been given a set of functions to call. It's up to notes.js to worry about the details of exactly where this data is stored. I'm excited to continue on building out this module in the next video, so let's go ahead and jump right into that.